In this video, what we're going to do is take a look at the difference between the object coordinate system and the world coordinate system. We'll also talk about how it can affect hierarchy, animation, and where you might see some other places of this world versus local concept creep up in Cinema 4D. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so let's talk about our different coordinate systems, our world and object, and we'll also get into some of the different axes and things like that we can work with. But let's start by creating a cube. Now, really, this would be true for any of our different object types. I don't think there's any exceptions, but by default, we are in object using the object coordinate system here. This is our toggle. If you toggle it on, you'll be using the world. It's a little sphere or world there. And really what object coordinate system means is, the orientation is going to be based on what we do to this object. So if I rotate this, notice how now my move tool, my scale tool, or even rotate are all based on what we do to this object. And that can be useful if you want to move your object along a specific axis at a given angle, or if you want to change the size of it, right, along a given dimension, especially once it's been rotated. All right, but there are also times where even if an object is rotated, you want to be able to move it, along the x-axis or a straight line along the x-axis or just perfectly up and down. And that's very hard to do when your object's been rotated. And yes, you could create a hierarchy to help you with that. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But we can also do that by just toggling on our world coordinate system now. And that will change our gizmo so that it now reflects the overall world where Y is up, X is left and right, Z typically back and forth, right? You can see that at the origin. You can also see it in the top right-hand corner here. So now if I just want to move this object left and right, I can do that. And if I move it up on the Y-axis, same thing. And really, that's it when it comes to kind of the differences in basics of world coordinate system versus object coordinate system. Now, to kind of dive into this a little bit more, let's create a torus. And I'm just going to make this torus a little bit larger, maybe something like this, move it over here and rotate it because I want to show you how hierarchies can affect this, or really how they don't make a difference. I'm going to take my cube and I'm going to make it a child of our torus. And essentially what we've just done here is made, change the origin for this cube. It's no longer going to be based on the center of our world, 0, 0, 0. It's now going to be based on our torus here and where its object axis is and, its position and orientation away from that. And if you want to just confirm that, what you can do is just zero out the position for our cube. Notice how it gets centered to our torus. And the rotation values also, if we zero those out, now match what we have for our torus, even though it may look a little bit strange. I want to point out, though, that that really doesn't impact our world versus object coordinate system. So world is still on. So you can see, Y is still up, X and Z still that way. And even if I rotate this differently, so it doesn't have the same orientation as our torus, and toggle that off, you can see it still, our object coordinate system is still respecting our cube here. Really the big thing though, the big takeaway here is that the world coordinate system is still based on the world, the origin, and not its parent like you might think, okay? Another thing I want to point out here with our different world and local coordinate systems is that it's per tool. So when it comes to your move tool, you can toggle between world and local. And if you switch to your rotate, okay, you can see it's different. It's still based on our object coordinate system. So I could toggle that on. And if I was to switch to, our scale, same thing. They each have their own toggle for world versus object, and Cinema 4D will remember that. Now, I want to dive into this a little bit more when it comes to kind of working with our different tools and our sub-object modes here, like Polygon. I'm not necessarily sure I would qualify this as, say different coordinate systems, but I do think it's similar enough because we are working with kind of the orientation of our gizmo or our move tool, rotate tool and scale tool. And so I've done a video where I dive deeper into this, so I'm not going to go quite in depth here. But I do want to point out that you have different options for the position of your move, rotate, and scale tools here, such as the world, the object, okay, which will use the object axis of, this thing, or selected, which if you have a polygon selection, it's going to center it there, or really use these values here to determine where it should be positioned. And this can give us more control, more precision when it comes to pushing and pulling polygons, modeling, that type of thing. You also have control over the axis, just like you did with the position. So you can orientate it to the axis of the selected. Okay, so that's why it's this angle here. And notice how that changes, right? So as I rotate it, it's changing based on the axis of the selected object here, or objects. Okay, kind of averages them out. You can also do world. So that's just going to use like our world coordinate system, like we've seen. Object is really just using kind of the local coordinate system for this object based on the object axis you would have in model mode, right? Notice how that's the same, even though its position is different. And then a few others: root, parent, normal, direction of the polygon. Really, when it comes to polygons, pretty much the same as selected in axis. Okay, unless of course your normals are flipped the wrong way. And a normal, of course, is the direction a polygon faces. Typically you want that to be outward. And if you were doing something like normal and something was reversed, right? So if I just go to, let's see, normal, nope. Where is it? It's been a while since I've actually used this. There it is, reverse normals. Right? Notice how it's facing downward and it's blue. That means it's actually going the wrong direction. But here we can base it on the normal, which could be useful if you had a lot more polygons and we're checking some things out and wanted to, once again, move, rotate, or position things a little bit more precisely, or even camera, which I suppose has its uses, but I'm not sure what they would be. So that is somewhat similar to our coordinate systems. And this holds up, and you have all these different options for your different modes here. So same thing with edges. Okay, though it gets a bit tricky if you only have a single edge, as it's not entirely sure how it should be oriented. You can see it's kind of splitting the difference there. Okay, and so all of that can be helpful to move things precisely. All right, now kind of taking this a step further, you can combine this with also your axis modification tool. So if you wanted to move this to a specific spot, right, maybe even using snap, you can, and that can help as well if you need a very specific orientation to do a move. Okay, but all of this comes back to our different coordinate systems, our different axes, and how we want our gizmo to be orientated when we're doing things to our objects, moving, scaling, rotating, or different kind of operations like that. Really quickly, let's talk about animating these properties with our different coordinate systems, mainly position here. But let's talk about our object coordinate system first. Well, if I just want to animate this along the x-axis, okay, I'm going to keyframe that. Go to say frame 28, but now when I go to move this, I don't have a perfectly straight axis to move this along. So I can do my best to, do that, but these values are changing here. I can come through and keyframe it, but now my my Y and Z values have changed from what they are previously. So ultimately, if I didn't want that, what I would need to do, keyframe my Y and Z values at frame 0, then go to frame 28, move this, but then only keyframe our X position, since that's the one I'm most concerned with. And there we go. It did require us to create a couple more keyframes. All right. Now, what we can do with this one is switch to the world coordinate system. Notice how much easier this is to work with. So I'll keyframe my X position, go to frame 28, move this along the X, and keyframe it again. And just like that, we've been able to do the same thing with fewer keyframes. So from an animation point of view, oftentimes the world coordinate system can be easier if we just need simple movements that align with the world coordinate system. lastly, what I wanted to do is just point out you will see this local versus world kind of thing pop up in several other places in Cinema 4D. And while the context can be slightly different, the basics are very similar here. So if I just come here to a plane effector, notice that in the transform space here, you can have it be the transform space of the node, the effector, or the object. Okay, even in materials, in certain textures, okay, like the max on noise, you can have the input here, the source, be the object or the world. Oftentimes, when you create a material tag, right, the projection here is somewhat similar, where UVW mapping is based on the object, where cubic or some of these other options are based more on the world and where the object is positioned. So this whole world versus object coordinate system thing does show up in a lot of other places. And with that, that will do it for this one. If there's anything else you would like to see, please leave me a comment down below. And if you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you could like it and subscribe to my channel. Until next time, take care.